Do you think we've passed peak woke?
Not at all. No,
Really? Okay. Can you touch
absolutely
on that?
not. And it's funny. I think when I hear about this, and I listened to quite a lot about this. Obviously, that's how I found you. Um, no, I think that this is going to last for generations. Um,
Wow.
I do. Yeah, and I think for people to think that like, oh, it's past now. Whether that's because of the recent presidential election or we're moving past it. No, absolutely not. There's a young woman who has a writer in the UK. Her name's Freya India.
Hmm.
And she has some really excellent pieces about this where she talks about, what she's a young woman and she talks about what she sees as the indoctrination of young women into critical social justice culture. And, if this is what they're being taught at a young age, when we're young, that tends to form our, views and our values. And I don't want to misquote her because she does such a beautiful job articulating this, but her take on it is basically that, yeah, this is not going away anytime in the near future,
Hmm.
as long as there are pathways to teaching young people, critical social justice culture, right? And this binary worldview. And that, if you don't buy into this, then somehow you're not a compassionate person and you're a bad person.
I mean, I think it depends on how you define woke. So I think people are kind of saying woke is dead. I don't think that's true. And especially if we consider woke to be sort of this like really specific, I guess not so, it is specific, but it's actually quite broad of critical consciousness and not just like DI trainings and things like that, then woke is like certainly not dead. And the fact that like, our field or education, there are like a lot of people who are very much in the woke cult and are not stopping. They're only going deeper. That's why I'm so concerned that like things are taking a turn, because as groups like this lose power, start to get exposed, it like turns into this sort of like self-fulfilling dynamic where they go like deeper and deeper. And with Trump, I think like that's a huge source of stress and like provocation for people and like sort of an excuse to like start crossing certain lines that they otherwise wouldn't cross. And I'm like really concerned that things are about to sort of spiral out of control in that sense. So I don't think woke is dead. I think woke is sort of like, I mean, it's bound to Jonestown, if you will. Like that's just the nature of it. That's like why I'm so concerned that like we're still 1000% woke in our field. And like that's where we're headed. And so it's really concerning to me.
The tipping point of Trump getting reelected was a breath of fresh air. I think people now feel like they can speak freely given the convincingness of his win. And that's going to percolate throughout academia. As far as whether or not we've escaped peak woke, I'm hesitant to make any sort of decisive claims on that, but I think certainly it's still a huge problem. It's still going to be one that they're going to try to make a problem, the left will. It's important to be vigilant against it, but I think that with some of the insanity that we saw leading up to the election, Biden's dementia being covered up, now we see how DEI has just basically led to immense suffering, or certainly been an influential factor in the absolutely disgraceful response to the fires in California, the fires in Hawaii. DEI is just, it's totally disgraced and been a sore spot and acid and corrosive to everything it touches. And so people are seeing that now. So I would say probably, yeah, we've passed a tipping point for peak woke, but it's still a very big problem and still one that we're going to have to continue to eliminate. We've passed peak woke, but woke is still very peak, if that makes sense.
I honestly have no idea where we're at. In academia, we might, like academia itself as like a research field, there might be some changes coming with the institutional changes that Trump and that are pushing through. But as in the broader culture, I'm not so sure. It's almost become detached from the academic, and the social realms are almost two separate things now. I feel like the academic realm might be moderating a little bit, but as for the wider culture, I couldn't know.
Yeah, I don't know where exactly this is going, but from what I see from my perspective, is the election told us that numerically, most people are over this, in a lot of ways. They're just not really putting up with it anymore. The thing is, the true believers are all in positions of power. They're university professors, administrators, they're running nonprofits, they're running HR departments in corporate America, and you cannot pry that power out of their hands. Like they're doing this as if they have the zeal of a kind of religious fanaticism. This is not, a disagreement over best practices over how to handle a certain client. This is like an existential battle between good and evil, the way they look at it. And, I honestly don't see how you resolve that. How does this, is it just going to be ugly for decades? Like, how do you resolve that? It feels like there's a lot of what you might call moderately woke people that are less woke than they were even 2 years ago. I like to compare it to like a religion where there's your diehard fundamentalists who are willing to kill for the faith, and then there's people like, you can go as extreme as there's atheists who say God bless you if someone sneezes. You know what I mean? There's people who are really not that invested in this at all, who have their pronouns and their email sign off. You know what I mean? And there's people who are like, kind of like, I don't really know why I'm still doing this. And they take their pronouns out, and they're not really going along with a lot of the performance anymore. But a lot of the true believers, like you're saying, especially in academia, I think in their mindset, it's like we went from controlling all of America for probably 10 years, and now we control this little corner of campus. Like, within our world, we need to be tyrants now to, like, I mean, it's really like an existential life or death, good versus evil, cosmic justice issue for them. And so it's like me being a tyrant on my classroom, for instance, that is a social justice issue. It's a moral issue. It is like a life or death. I have to do this. And I don't think the true believers are backing off anytime soon.
No, absolutely not. And I think there's like also a dynamic here where a lot of, I feel like, segments of the woke, especially like the true believers, are doing things like violating the law, and then they really don't want to get caught or like panicking when it feels like things are starting to close in on them, because a lot of people feel completely comfortable of like violating like using confidentiality as a cover to do things that are probably illegal, because they feel like they're justified because of like fascism, like Trump equals fascism equals I'm like justified to fight back against this by violating the law, civil disobedience, etc., resistance. And like doing that is crossing a huge line. And once that happens, like you only go deeper and deeper. So like this is kind of like the spiral that I'm concerned about. And I don't want to see these like moderately woke people who maybe are not like in on the doctrine accidentally get pulled into this stuff because they don't understand that like there's crazier things going on.
I wonder if America is going to enter a new sort of like 1960s era. I don't know if you know, but in the 1960s, something like thousands of bombs were sent in the mail over that decade from leftist like extremists. Like,
Is that the
people
Weather
are bombing.
Underground?
Yeah, I think there are a number of groups doing it, but there are all sorts of bombs and sort of political violence. And I wonder if you're gonna experience a bit more of that. I mean, you're seeing some of it with the Tesla burnings and stuff like that. I wonder if you're right that there might be the general layperson might be like, I don't have to do this anymore. I'm free to sort of be a little bit more moderate. But there'll be that extreme sort of group that might become worse. It might end up with a bit more of this sort of violence. And
I think really the main thing I hope for is that more people such as yourself begin to feel comfortable, speaking out on social media, or, and have a public platform where they can share their views, because this is the only way this is going to, I think more people are going to feel connected is by realizing, yeah, you know what, maybe this is what I was taught in grad school or what I was taught in undergrad, but this doesn't resonate with me, or I don't like the way that, my, relatives who don't have a college degree or, kind of condescended, by, these academic elites. Do you know what I mean? So I think what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way is I think just taking a more humanistic approach where we connect in person and know that there's other people who, feel the same way we do. And even if we have to find each other through social media, that's fine. But I think getting back to real life in-person connections and feeling connected to people in our community is what's going to, help with this.
Yeah, it's going to be taking back the institutions, or like I said, creating parallel ones. I think we're seeing a little bit of that change now with some of the changes that have been made at, some of the subtle changes that have been made at some of the Ivy Leagues. Certainly the post-Hamas 10/7 stuff led to certainly some changes that were probably good. But it's really going to be decided upon whether or not you want to try to salvage an institution that's captured or just create parallel ones. But certainly in the case of the gender insanity, it's gonna be a legal issue too. It's gonna be suing. It's gonna be criminal prosecutions of people that have misled young, vulnerable adolescents. So it's gonna be a multi-pronged approach to either creating parallel institutions and sort of cleansing the culture of this insanity, this madness.